It was April 1966. I was 21 years old, and I was a senior at the University of Kentucky. I was driving in the car. I turned on the radio, found a local station out of Paris, Kentucky, and they were talking about historical things in Bourbon County, and they said that Bourbon County had 2 covered bridges. Well, that just struck me as interesting. I didn't know Kentucky had any covered bridges. I thought all the covered bridges were in New England. Pretty soon somebody called in and gave directions to the 2 bridges in Bourbon County. Later on, my friend Wilson Sebastian, we were roommates at UK, and I asked him if he'd like to go with me to see these 2 covered bridges. A couple of weeks after I got the directions from the radio show, Wilson and I headed out to find the first bridge. That's the Sea Road Bridge, which was east of Paris, Kentucky. The directions given by the listener were pretty good. We didn't have any trouble finding the bridge, and it was quite a thrill to just on this little back road to find this bridge that had been constructed 60, 80 years before. It was a little bridge crossing Boone Creek. We parked the car off to the side and walked up to the bridge. When we got inside, we noticed a sign tacked up on the inside of the bridge, and it was talking about the Covered Bridge Society. So Wilson copied down the address. We finished at that bridge and then drove to the other covered bridge in Bourbon County, the Colville Bridge. The sheriff. Uh-oh. This bridge has been unpainted. It's been painted brown. It's been painted white. Right now, what is it? It's like green and white, isn't it? After we got back, Wilson and I both rode off to get a copy of the Covered Bridge book. I've still got my original World Guide to Covered Bridges. I've kept it all these years. It's now held together with string as it was worn through the ages. The first thing we noticed was that those 2 bridges weren't the only 2 bridges in Kentucky. Actually, there were 18 bridges. The second thing we noticed was that these bridges weren't going to be that easy to find. If you look here at Franklin County, and it says Schweitzer, North Elkhorn Creek, and then there's a big blank spot, mentions the length and the construction of the bridge, but there's virtually no information that would help you find this bridge, and you likely wouldn't find North Elkhorn Creek and probably not even Schweitzer on most Kentucky maps. Since the book didn't always have the best of directions, when I started this, I wrote off to states, I wrote off to counties to get information about covered bridges, and I got lots of good responses from that, and that helped a lot. Also, I go to libraries, make copies of maps, and then I'd pore over this information, try to identify where the bridge was going to be, and once I made my best guess, then I would plan my trip like that. One thing's for sure, you're not going to see a map like this again. I picked up lots of maps at gas stations. They were all free then. I got this map in 1966. Then I put little X's where I thought the covered bridges in Kentucky were. And this is one of the maps that Wilson and I used to go around and find these bridges. So that became the challenge. Wilson and I decided we'd go see the other 16 covered bridges in Kentucky. Over the next several weeks, we drove a lot of miles on a lot of back roads, but we saw those 16 covered bridges and finished the covered bridges that we knew about in Kentucky. Well, little did I know when I was making this drive over 50 years ago that this would become the norm for me, driving down country roads looking for covered bridges. Well, folks, this isn't a bit unusual. Let's see, where can I turn around? I did a lot of this. I swear I had less trouble finding this bridge when I didn't have nothing.
Turn left onto State Highway 3118. Take the next left onto State Highway 3118.
So does this look like State Highway 3118? I missed the sign. I've never been on this part of the road. I've always come from the other way on the bridge. This is a new adventure. Well, there were so many bridges that my goal pretty much became finding the bridge, taking a picture, moving on to the next bridge. So the camera became very important because the picture was really a record of the trip. So I had a few different cameras, but finally settled on the Nikon FT, which was a medium level Nikon camera, and it served me well, and that's what I've used for all the pictures until about 2012 when I started taking digital pictures. Now Wilson, of course, always would one-up me, so he had a Nikon FT-N that gave central focus and light exposure, so could be, at least in some situations, a little more accurate in setting the light. Da-dee-da. The slideshow will start in 10 minutes. We have popcorn and non-alcoholic beverages in the canteen. Just go up to the cash register and turn over all your money. I started out, I'm not sure how I got into the slides, but it may have been I borrowed my sister's camera initially, and that's the film she had, but I thought that was a good idea because, gee, I'd be able to do what I'm doing now. Load a carousel, put it on, and put on a slideshow for people. And then, of course, after I got into it, I realized that this would be the most boring slideshow you would ever have. So I never did very many slideshows, but I kept shooting slides. That's right. Right here, I got 36 big ones. So for this slideshow, we're going to the Bells Ford Bridge, which was north of Seymour, Indiana. The bridge ultimately collapsed and fell into the river, and much of the bridge was saved and is currently being reconstructed in Fishers, Indiana. And so we're going to take a look at how the bridge looked in the late 60s. Here we go. And there it is. It was a two-span bridge across the East Fork of the White River in Jackson County, Indiana. And it was the post-construction. It was the only bridge in the United States with that type of construction. And so to me, it's exciting that they saved and are reconstructing the bridge, at least part of it, in exactly the same truss design. So that's going to be my next road trip. So now it's September of 1966. I'd seen about 108 covered bridges. I'm not sure how I had time to do that. I was starting graduate school, but I was in graduate school in Pennsylvania, the state that had the most covered bridges, and so I just kept going out when I had a chance and taking pictures. Also in 1966, I got my first dobro, which is an acoustical slide guitar. I knew nothing about playing it, but I knew I wanted to try. So now I've got something else to take up my time. I got this dobro for Christmas. My parents gave it to me in December of 1966. They knew that I was fascinated and wanted to try to learn to play. And I told them about a place in Lexington, Esco Hankins Music Store, that had one in the window. And some way they managed to buy it for me.
I met him through music first, and then got more acquainted with him, a little bit more acquainted. Then we moved in together when I came back from Arkansas in the summer of '82. So that was when he was really getting hot on, he was still doing his residency, because he's doing the doc in the box thing, you know, as he called it. And he used to come home every day and say, "I hate kids." These snotty-nosed little, you know, kids. He said they all show up and they got colds, and I come home, I catch the cold. But he was, you know, after we got acquainted more, you know, I knew about his covered bridge, you know, crusade, you know, to find them all and visit them all, you know, because Jim would play dobro with us when he wasn't at the hospital, you know, doing his residency. In fact, we used to ask him the question all the time, you know, well, you're going to have to make a choice. Are you going to be a doctor or are you going to be a dobro player?
Let me see, Dr. Jim Huey. I went on one road trip with him back in 1982. In fact, it was around New Year's 1982. And he wanted me to go with him to Jekyll Island, Georgia, where he was going to play dobro with a band called Bill Grant and Delia Bell. So we drove all the way down there, and Uncle Josh Graves, another dobro player from the Grand Ole Opry, a really famous guy, he showed up. And so Jim had to sit in the audience. Of course, they wanted Josh to play dobro because he was famous. They asked me to play guitar. And that was the first night. But the second night, Uncle Josh, something to do with a firearm. Anyway, he got arrested. And there was no dobro player, so they asked Jim to play the second night. I stood in the audience and took a picture. And that was the end of the show. Then, the next day, before we went back to Ohio, I said, hey, Jim, I've never been to Florida. We're real close. Let's just go so I can say I actually went to Florida. I live there now. So we drove across the border to this marina-like place. And I'm standing there by all the boats, and Jim took a picture. Little did I know that Jim knew of and saw a covered bridge, not a very famous one, and so he took a picture of that. I didn't even know the covered bridge was in the picture or not, and then we drove north. We were done with that. He just told me the other day, I did that because I knew there was a covered bridge there. Anyhow, I didn't know nothing about it. We drove north to Cincinnati. It got colder and colder. Jim was driving one of these cloth-top Jeeps, like Swiss cheese, with holes all through it, and I don't even know if it was freezing cold. And around the north part of Tennessee, south part of Kentucky, 25, 30 degrees, the gas gauge showed like 1/8 red light on, and I got scared. I thought we could die out here, but we made it back to Cincinnati, and that was my one and only trip with Dr. Jim Huey.
So now that my time was so much limited, I started making these marathon trips. So I'd planned, I was in Pittsburgh, I'd planned to see bridges in eastern Pennsylvania. So I would leave on Friday night, drive all night to the first bridge, take pictures all day, and then get back to Pittsburgh sometime late Saturday night or early Sunday morning. On one of those marathon trips, I left about 10 o'clock on Friday night and drove to eastern Pennsylvania, took the first picture at sunup of the first bridge, and spent the entire day, took the last picture of the bridge with the headlights on my car shining on the bridge, and then drove back to Pittsburgh, and I had seen 47 covered bridges that day. During the summer of 1967, Wilson came to Pittsburgh, and we took a 2-week trip to New England, and went as far as Upper Maine and New Brunswick. And when we came back, we had seen 185 covered bridges, including the one in Heartland, New Brunswick, the longest covered bridge in the world, 1,282 feet. I think that was the last major trip Wilson and I took together, but I didn't stop. I guess I was nuts at that time. I went every chance I got. Between 1968 and 1969, I made 27 trips to Pennsylvania, 17 trips to Ohio, 9 trips to Indiana, 2 each to Canada, Alabama, Georgia, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, and North Carolina, and then one trip back up to Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and then one trip to West Virginia, Missouri, New York, New Jersey, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Iowa. So I covered most of the eastern part of the United States. Well, this is maybe the oldest covered bridge in Kentucky. And it was the one bridge which was already closed to traffic in 1966. In 1997, it flooded and completely washed away. But they came along and got enough community efforts, and they rebuilt the bridge just like it was. It's the first time I've seen this bridge. It was completely destroyed and completely rebuilt. So if that's a new bridge, you could argue that's a new bridge for me. It's one of the two bridges in Kentucky that have this sawtooth pattern on the portal entrance. And it had that before, so when they rebuilt it. Also, it has a shingled roof. Many of them have metal roofs or various kinds, but I guess it's one of my favorite bridges, and it's probably the closest one of the closest ones to northern Kentucky. Well, we're here in Metamora, Indiana. Metamora, its biggest claim to fame is a covered bridge aqueduct, the only such covered bridge that I'm aware in the world. It carries water across water. The Miami and Whitewater Canal, which was built in the 1800s, the bridge carries the canal across Duck Creek. And this demonstrates, when I started with covered bridges, I didn't really know much about them. And I learned that the bridges were covered to protect the truss. And that is these series of heavy wooden triangles and an arch that supports the weight of the bridge. There were several designs. This is one of the more common ones, a Burr arch covered bridge. But there were several other structures, Howe, Town, Long, a number of others, and some were just varieties by local builders as to how the bridge was built. But this is a unique covered bridge in the history of covered bridges, and has been well maintained by the state of Indiana. Most of these trips I went by myself. My mother was never very crazy about me being out in the middle of nowhere alone. I did manage to get her to go on a trip with me. We went to central Indiana, and we ended up seeing 5 bridges. If she were telling it, she'd say, we never got to eat anything. We'd had hardly any bathroom breaks. We almost ran out of gas. It was a really long trip. And she said she wasn't going on any more trips with me. But I think I did coax her. I think a couple of times I coaxed her on going some more, and ended up making a trip to north central Pennsylvania and saw 3 bridges one time, and that was another marathon trip. even once you found the bridge, sometimes it wasn't easy. You could see the bridge, but you'd have to get out and walk because the problems with the road, or the bridge was deserted and you had to walk across a field. Well, we talked a little bit about how I've dragged my friends into covered bridge hunting, whether they liked it or not. And I'm here with Barry Woods. We've been friends since grade school. Yep. And we've had several adventures together, but I think it'd be interesting to talk about our trip to Illinois and Missouri. It was in April of 1969. And I tried to convince Barry to go. And what did you say, Barry?
Well, it didn't take too much convincing. You called me at work on Friday and said you wanted to go Friday night when I got off from work. So I said, well, you know, that's fine. We'll go to Illinois if you want to, but I'd kind of like to go see the Golden Arch while we're in Missouri. Can we do that? And we said, well, we're going to do that. So we left after work on Good Friday and drove to somewhere in Illinois, not too far from the bridge, and got a motel, which was a waste of time. We slept a couple of hours and got up and left and got there at daybreak, and everything was flooded everywhere we went. And so we had to park beside the road and walk back through a cornfield to see this bridge, as I recall. We came back and we were, our feet was totally wet and muddy. And I recall I took off my socks and threw them in the cornfield as we left. And after we took the pictures of the bridge, and then we went to Missouri and went up in the Golden Arch. Then we wandered back into Kentucky, crossed the Mississippi River, and it was flooded. And we were one of the last cars that got across the bridge, or the ferry that night, and got home Easter Sunday morning about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning,
yeah.
Something like that.
If anybody's been on a road trip with Jim, there's a good chance that they would have seen an old friend covered bridge somewhere along the way. There was this one time in eastern North Carolina where we were following the directions to this bridge. This is before the time of cell phones and GPS, and we were just going pole to pole. And we went down this dirt road. Well, the gravel road turned into a dirt road, and the dirt road turned into less than a dirt road. And we ran into this field hand that we stopped and asked for directions, and he said that he didn't think that this would go over very well with the owner of the property, but it was down this road. So the road went to the left, and we went down the road to the left, and pretty soon this pickup truck came up with a shotgun in the back window, and we were on this levee, and there was like a swamp to the left and the road to the right, and this guy stopped us, and I thought, well, we're going to be in some kind of movie where they find us floating in the swamp pretty soon. But the owner of the property was real nice. Jim sweet talked him into, he said he was just there to take pictures. He wasn't there to publicize anything. This was all just very private. And the guy was real nice and let us go down the road, and Jim took his pictures, and we got out of there as quickly as we could.
Well, Cathy and I had one other adventure in hunting a bridge in Quebec. The last river bridge was just completely deserted, no roads going to it at all. I didn't know if I'd be able to see it or not. We started down this road. It was not much of a road, and we came to basically a water table. There was just a river going across the road, and I thought, well, this is one bridge I'm not going to be able to see. So we turned around and started back out the road, and here came a lady in a pickup truck with drywall in the back, and we stopped. I told her what I was looking for. She said, "Oh, sure, you can find the bridge. Turn around and follow me." And she just drove the pickup truck right through that water to the other side, and I followed her. And we went a little way, and she stopped, said, "Park here," and it's about a mile walking in this direction. And so we did, and we walked a mile. We found the bridge. I took some pictures, and we walked back across the water table, and that was our adventure in Quebec. Once again, if something had happened back in there, they wouldn't have found us in years. We had maps. The maps didn't have this road on them. So around every turn was excitement. We're looking for a road. We don't know how far it's going to be down here or exactly what it's going to look like. Sometimes I knew the name of the road and what I was looking for. Sometimes I was only going on, it's north of this or west of that, and I was picking roads and hoping I got the right one. On one of my trips to Georgia, an interesting thing happened. I was trying to find this bridge on the Banks-Franklin County line. If you look in the book, it says Urena Kessler, which doesn't mean anything, county line, which we already knew it was on the county line, so it didn't give really any indication where the bridge would be. So it really didn't allow me to just drive right to the bridge. So I saw a lady out in the yard and I stopped. I thought maybe I'd just ask her. And some way she got the idea I was a government employee and I really wasn't meeting her expectations. She thought I was a lazy government employee out wasting tax dollars, and she wasn't bashful about telling me that. So I made a hasty retreat out of her driveway and went on down the road, and eventually I found the bridge, the Urena Bridge on the Banks-Franklin County line. By 1972, I'd seen most all the bridges in the eastern United States, but I was really busy. I had got my PhD, I had a job working analyzing meteorites, and then in 1976 decided to go to medical school and spent the next 4 years in medical school and 3 years in residency. So now it's 1983 and I finished my residency, and I said I've got to go out west and see the rest of the covered bridges. So I took a trip out west.
I knew he was planning the trip, but I knew he was gone. But I didn't know he was renting a car that was going to be, unlimited mileage. And so he got back, and how was the trip, Jim? And it was, well, I don't think they'll ever rent another car to me. When he took the car back, he'd put over 5,000 miles on it in 2 weeks. And, I don't know how fast he had to drive to get that done, but he drove all the way up and down the West Coast in that car. And he got more miles out of a rented car than I ever did, I can tell you.
So these were the last of the covered bridges in the United States. On this trip, I had seen 74 bridges, and I was standing at the last one in Whitman County, Washington, south of Spokane. And I just thought, when I got that book, it said there were a little over 1,100 covered bridges in the United States, and now I'd seen them all. This was the last one. That took me almost 2 decades, about 17 years. This is a chronological list of new bridges as I saw them. Starting with the Sea Road Bridge, the first one I saw in April of 1966. And as you can see, the number of bridges kept growing and kept growing. And then sometimes I would do some summaries. So I, for instance, talked about how many bridges were open to traffic, how many were closed, what color the bridges were. At the beginning, I kept that kind of information. And at one point I said I had 202 bridges left to do and where they were, and eventually I clicked them all off. This is a list of bridges that met their demise either before I saw them or shortly after. The Sea Road Bridge itself was torn down the year after I first saw it. It was torn down in 1967. The Snavely Mills Bridge was the longest covered bridge in Pennsylvania, and I got to see all the bridges in Pennsylvania, but not before that bridge met its demise. This is the location of the first covered bridge I ever saw back in the spring of 1966. It was lost in 67, only 1 year after I first saw it. This used to be the Sea Pike Bridge. It used to have personality, and now it's just concrete. And some of the bridges burned down. I remember in 1967 in New England, Wilson and I got to the Fields Bridge in New Hampshire, and we were 1 day late. The bridge had been burned down that night. There was still smoke coming up from the creek, and there was a sign on the bridge saying, rebuild this bridge. So there are people out there that have really made efforts, both collective and individual, to preserve these bridges. So in addition to preserving these bridges, there have actually been a number of new, authentic wooden truss covered bridges built in the United States. In the last 30 years in Ohio alone, there have been 14. And these again are authentic wooden truss covered bridges built in the old style, but reinforced in a way that will allow them to support heavier traffic. So in these last years, I made several trips to Canada, and I think I've seen all the covered bridges in North America. I've seen 1,317 bridges, 1,132 in the United States, and 185 in Canada. This is not entertaining at all. Carousels. You want to know how many carousels I got? Okay. I don't know how many I have either, but I have a lot. There's one. Bunch. I have to hide them or Cathy will throw them away. Indiana. Pennsylvania. Okay, that's some of them. And then oh, great. All this is going to show is that I'm a hoarder. Okay, folks, there they are. 50 years of work. Is this all of them? I thought I had more than this. Did I put some? Oh, yeah, we haven't got them all. I knew there was more. That one stack was taller than I was. "50 years of work, over 8,000 slides. Lots of bridges. And miles and miles and miles. I put 172,000 miles on my 66 Chevelle between 66 and 74. So 8 years, 172,000 miles. I think I stand corrected. It was 174,000 miles on my 66 Chevelle between 66 and 1974. Come on out to my room over the garage. First thing you see is these hooked rugs. Patty Shute, one of my dear friends from Pittsburgh, made those for me years ago. And I've kept them and I see them every day. You pick up all kinds of things and people give me things. Here's a coaster of the Dribblebist Bridge in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Christmas ornaments, covered bridges and Christmas seem to go together. This was a replica of the Humpback Bridge in Covington, Virginia. I picked up covered bridge napkins, covered bridge note cards, lots and lots of covered bridge books, covered bridge puzzles, and somebody made me a little covered bridge Christmas stocking. But here we have some tapestries. Basically, you can use them for dish towels. And this depicts covered bridges in really all over the country. This would be Linden, New Hampshire. New Hampshire? Ooh, I think that's a mistake. I think it's Vermont. Come on out into the room. I have several pictures. There's one over here painted by Margaret Lunn, a girl I met in Boston in 1967, of the Conway, New Hampshire Bridge. This is a replica of the rebuilt covered bridge in Schweitzer, Kentucky that was given to me. Some pictures here. This is a picture of a bridge near Huntsville, Tennessee, that some friends gave me. Barry and I were there in 1966. We were afraid to drive across the bridge. It was really in the middle of nowhere and not very well maintained. Even shells can be turned into covered bridges. A musical friend painted a bridge on the shell for me. And that was probably about 1983 or 84. Well, one day I went to an antique store and I was going up to the second floor. They had on the stairway, pictures just all along the wall on the stairway. And I looked and I saw this picture. And I looked again and I said, I know where that bridge is. That's the Sea Road Bridge, the first covered bridge I ever saw back in 1966. And I went on and looked through the store, but I knew I was going to get this painting. And I came back to the stairway and asked the guy to get it down for me. And the guy, he got it down, and we were going back to the cash register, and I said, you know, I've seen, I think at that time, 1,100 covered bridges. That's the first one I ever saw. And the guy was like, and just went on bringing up the sale. Just goes to show that something that monopolized a tremendous amount of time in my life didn't matter at all to anybody else. It's believed at one time there were up to 12,000 covered bridges in the United States. With that, they were so common, it probably wouldn't have been anybody's hobby. But as the numbers dwindled, and they dwindled really dramatically, the bridges that were left became more special. With the advent of good roads and the automobile, I was able to see all the covered bridges that were left that I knew about. I have to say, sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had never heard about that first little covered bridge. So Trina, I thank you for doing this documentary, kind of chronicling the escapades I've had for over 60 years chasing these bridges.
Well, I met Jim in 1996. We met through music, and I got to play in a lot of bands with him over the years. And then, I found out pretty quickly how you had a degree in geochemistry, and then you went on to get a regular doctorate degree and worked at the VA hospital, and I thought that was fascinating. On top of being pretty much a semi-professional musician. And then with these bridges, I just think you must be have seen more than anyone, in the world, maybe. I don't know. I just thought it was fascinating, and I thought it'd be a great topic to do a documentary on, and I appreciate you letting me work with you on this documentary.
And in the process, I've dragged you to at least 18 covered bridges.
I did get to see a
as
lot.
far away, 2 in California.
Yes.
And
And my little dog Ruthie got to see one.
yes,
My first little doggie Ruthie got to see one.
that was
when we first got her
that was
second day.
That was a bridge built in Ohio, a new bridge to me. A couple of the bridges in Ohio.
She was not
you and
impressed. I don't think.
She wasn't impressed,
No, I don't
but
think she was impressed.
I'm not sure you were either at the time. But we did see 2 new to me covered bridges in Ohio. We mentioned earlier that the plaque on the first bridge I saw about the National Society for Preservation of Covered Bridges. They have a couple of newsletters that come out. One, Covered Bridge Topics, which is really more of a historical, having historical articles which tell about the history of bridges in a county or an individual bridge, and a newsletter which tells more about what's currently going on with bridges that have been damaged, they're bridges that are being repaired. So you could Google the National Society for Preservation of Covered Bridges and learn a lot about the history and the current happenings in the world of covered bridges. Well, these bridges took me to a lot of places I would have never seen if I didn't have the purpose of finding the covered bridge. I saw a lot of parts of the country I wouldn't have seen, some very nice places. I don't know if I've seen more covered bridges than anyone else, probably not, but I do know I saw a lot of covered bridges. And it's been quite an adventure in trying to see all the bridges in North America. I mentioned there have been some new covered bridges built, and I think I've seen most or all of those, that at least all of the ones that I know about. I'm not sure about my next adventure, but the book was The World Guide to Covered Bridges. There are bridges in other countries, bridges in Europe, Switzerland, Austria. So I don't know. That might be my next trip.